I mean, I find that it's very interesting how you determine firstly that it might be time to find new hosts, and that whole process of getting them ready to hit one of those major late night shows. Jay was saying, I want to avoid all this infighting. I'm going to announce in 5 years that Conan's going to take over. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about that process of when you decide to start looking for someone, where you look for them and just preparing them for that launch.
I was still a relatively junior executive in that window. And so it wouldn't be fair for me to say that I had a lot of say in the timings that anything would be happening. I think people listened to my input, which was both nice of them, and I think spoke to how much they recognized my interest and attention to late night also. There's sort of two things that were happening at the time. One was you never necessarily knew when someone was going to say they'd had enough of a show. And I never experienced that directly, but you got to remember, like for someone like Rick, he was there when Johnny Carson surprised everybody by saying, I'm going to retire in a year when he said this. And that wasn't something that was just widely known and well known. When that happened, that sets all of these wheels in motion for people to figure out, okay, who can host, who's ready to do this. And that's not just an 11:30 conversation, that's also a 12:30 conversation. So once that happened, for us at NBC at the time, we were like, just keep a running list of people you like, of people that you think maybe have the chops to host and have the want. And there's a lot of talented people out there, but it's what they say, I think, I don't know who said this originally. I heard it from Rick, but it was probably Johnny Carson, who said, like, use everything you've ever learned in your life when you host one of these shows.
Everything up your sleeve and you pull it out, I think.
Yeah. And so, if you liked magic when you were a kid, you're probably going to do some magic tricks if you're hosting one of these shows. If you can sing, you're singing. If you can dance, like put on your tap shoes. All those things are important and could be used for something. So that well-rounded nature is really important in these situations. When it comes to timing, some of that is up to you and some of it is not up to you. For NBC at the time, they started talking and thinking about the future of the Tonight Show because they didn't want to be caught in some ways off guard, and they didn't want to lose the people who were there, who they knew were capable and ready and deserving. So at that point, that was Conan. And it was also, I think, part of the idea, just some of the thought process was, when is it time to sort of hand over the baton? And who has the say? Who should be saying this? Depending on who you ask, there's a different answer to that. But NBC in news had pretty successfully transitioned at the time from Tom Brokaw to Brian Williams with a relatively long, I think at that point it was like an 18-month window of time where Brokaw had announced his retirement, that he was going to, he didn't really retire, but that he was moving on from hosting the main news, the 6 p.m. news, and that Brian Williams would take over. That went well. Everybody liked both people. They were both involved. Brokaw was still part of NBC and still came back to do documentaries and political coverage and election coverage. So I think with that sort of mindset, a lot of the NBC folks were thinking, can we do this in late night as well? But with a longer lead time was also, in the moment, it seemed like it was a very successful concept. That in 2004, we can make announcements that we know, we're so confident in ourselves that we know both that these two giants of late night are going to be in their roles for the next 5 years. And at that point, they will transition Conan to hosting The Tonight Show. But 5 years is a really long time. And from 2004 to 2009, there were also many different people who held the role of president at NBC. And so you might have a plan. I'm sure lots of people have gone through this. You have a plan, that plan gets greenlit, and then someone new comes in, and you have to get that plan greenlit once again. And then another new person comes in, and you have to convince them that that's also the right plan. Somehow it worked out so that this transition continued to happen. But even by 2008, there was still a real strong desire to keep Jay Leno at NBC however they could, so that he wouldn't compete against Conan from another place. And they were able to figure that out by giving him the 10 o'clock slot, which was an unprecedented situation that was never done before and has not been done since. And it was a really, really difficult position for Jay, for Conan, for Rick and me. It was so radical at the time. And the people who host these shows are creatures of habit. They go to the same spot to tell their monologue jokes. They go to their desk is one place, their band is in one place. They have a rhythm. And when you disrupt that rhythm, whether that's moving a show 3,000 miles or moving a show 100 yards to another studio on the same lot, which is what the Jay Leno show did, it's still really challenging to get up and start going again. But the expectations at that point are, well, just be as good as you were before. I've known you for 10 years or 15 years. I've watched you on TV all the time. I might not have watched every day, but my memories are the absolute highlights of your career. So do that every night. And that's a massive undertaking with an incredible amount of eyes on you. And so I just think that clearly, even with the most capable and smartest people that I've ever worked with, you can still sometimes make decisions that don't turn out the way you hoped.
Do you think that, with the power of retrospection, that giving him the 10 p.m. slot was the right choice, if you will? When he debuted, it was fantastic, but then by November, the ratings started falling significantly.
Yeah, I always thought that it was a little bit unfair the way that they presented 10 o'clock to Jay. It was unfair also to Conan that they left him so exposed as well. The idea that NBC had at the time was that the efficiencies of doing a stripped show 5 nights a week at 10 o'clock was such a cost-saving effort compared to what it costs to do the Law and Orders of the world or any of those big budget dramas that were typically on at 10 o'clock at night at the time, that your show didn't have to have the same type of ratings and viewership numbers. When you had the Jay Leno show at 10 o'clock, you could still be very successful, could still make money for the network and make money for the show and protect Conan in as much as he doesn't have to compete against both David Letterman and Jay Leno when he's at 11:30. What they thought about less was, how is that 10 o'clock show, even a less successful rating, how does that affect news? How Matter Station is going to be? What's that going to do to 11:30 and Conan, who will never have really had an exposure opportunity to reap the benefits of, like, it was a little bit removed, but there was must-see TV was a big deal at NBC on Thursday nights, which I'm not sure how much that sort of resonates for you all, but like before DVRs, you watched TV when it aired, and that was the only time you watched it. So they had Friends on at 8 o'clock, they had Seinfeld on at 9 o'clock, they had ER on at 10 o'clock, and 35 million people would watch that night. And then from that group, there'd be another 8 million people that would watch the Tonight Show at 11:30, I should say, because they'd see the promo on during ER or whatever, and they'd still just stay up and they'd keep their television on NBC. And that's just what happened. That was just how they worked, how people watch television. So, the idea that like viewers also were creatures of habit sometimes, and they liked their local news program that they watched, and they liked their late night show that they watched, and they want to tune in every night. Like that still happened as well. But there was a sort of a descent into chaos ultimately that happened because the network realized pretty quickly their best hopes and dreams for what could be achieved with a 10 o'clock stripped late night show in the Jay Leno show could not sustain. And they had to make changes. And then they opted to make that change by putting Jay back at 11:30. And so that's when it hurts to have spent 7 years thinking about something and 5 months having these hoped for plans sort of change on you without being able to have a whole lot of say into the process, because we all have bosses, and the bosses are the ones who get to make this decision.